Good evening and welcome to Orient TV English News Summary. The Syrian Human Rights Network reported that 54 people are killed in Syria so far, most of them in Idlib. Amongst them, 5 children and 5 women, one of whom is a Jordanian national, where the regime's army bombed the city of Khan Sheikhoun with aircraft and tanks. In addition to that, many civilians were wounded in Al-Habid due to the bombing and elsewhere in Idlib, the town of Ma'arat al-Nu'man, residents held a funeral for a family of 5 members who were murdered today by the Assad gunfire, while the other towns declared strikes and marched in anti-Assad rallies in condemnation of the ongoing massacres. And 2 people have died in the Suwaida province today after a car exploded in the Fursan Square. And according to the coordinating committee in the city, residents took to the streets to denounce the crime, while images show the regime forces attacking the peaceful demonstrators and beating them brutally. It is worth mentioning that this rebellious movement in Suwaida today confirms that the people of the mountain are an essential part of the revolution of dignity, no matter how hard the Assad regime tries to make them seem neutral. Dozens wounded due to the prolonged shelling and rocket launching on the towns of Al-Latamina, Karnas, Tibat al-Imam in the province of Hama. In addition, Al-Madiq Castle, the villages of Sahl al-Ghab and Shahshibu Mountain were also exposed to the shelling from the military barriers of the regime's forces. 30 unarmed civilians were reported dead in Damascus, 10 of them in the town of Masraba, in a new massacre committed by the regime's forces, who used air missiles, tanks and armored vehicles, raiding the residents' homes and carrying out executions, and slaughtered many civilians using knives. And in response to these horrific massacres, activists in the center of the capital conducted bloodless rebellious activities under the slogan Boiling Damascus Part 2, where they blocked more than 30 downtown streets, and they continued marching their way to freedom in anti-government rallies. In Dar'a, the regime's mortal shelling was renewed today, targeting a camp of displaced civilians who fled their homes in other parts of the province. The regime's forces also targeted Dar'a city, the town of As-Sahwa, Al-Jiza and Ghasm. Due to this shelling, at least 10 innocent Syrian citizens were murdered. Moreover, several mortar bombs were launched at the Palestinian refugee camp, and explosions rocked the town of Nahteh, while Al-Yadude was exposed to heavy gunfire. Also, the afflicted town of Tel Shahab was raided today by the regime's forces. This campaign of raids was assisted by armored trucks, tanks, and intense but random gunfire. In another development, an explosion shook a village in Homs at a time when violent military operations continued in Homs suburbs and repeated bombing on many towns and villages of the province, during which many were killed, including a child. In the meantime, residents in Restan found unidentified bodies behind one of the residential buildings. And huge explosions rocked Al-Matar neighborhood in Deir ez-Zor as clashes took place between the Assad regime forces and the Syrian Freedom Army in several districts in the province. Meanwhile, Deir ez-Zor city and the towns of Al-Jubaila, Al-Arida, Al-Muwadafin and Al-Urfi all experienced dreadful shelling, after which several victims were murdered and others wounded. This intense bombing caused major property damage. Following that, evening demonstrations flooded the terrorized streets of Deir ez-Zor, all condemning the Arab and international apathy. In Aleppo, the regime continued bombing Atarib city with rockets and artillery fire, while demolishing many houses in other parts of the city. In addition to that, clashes took place between the regime forces and the Syrian Freedom Army, who were able to destroy a regime military aircraft. Deputy Secretary General of the Arab League, Ahmed bin Hali, said that the meeting of the Syrian opposition group was an important step to unify the visions, especially as it represents the component of the opposition at home and abroad, and that the Arab League merely played a mediating role to bring points of view closer. The British Foreign Secretary William Hague said that Russia must understand that standing behind Syrian President Bashar al-Assad is not an act of glory. While the West is attempting to put an end to the conflict in Syria, Hague clarified at a news conference after meeting his French counterpart Laurent Fabius that Russia must understand that the situation in Syria will lead to collapse, meaning that it is utterly useless for anyone to stand in line with the Assad regime. And finally in the news, the Turkish armed forces reported that on Wednesday they found the bodies of 2 pilots shot down by Syria last month and their assistant in the bottom of the sea. Now they are trying to pull them out. The army has been looking for the bodies since the airplane was shot down on the 22nd of June. And this week hired a specialized vessel to lift debris from the depth of about 1,000 meters underwater. With this, we end our news summary from Orient TV. You can join us again tomorrow at the same time for the latest updates on the Syrian revolution. And you may also visit us on our Facebook page. Thank you for watching and goodbye.